What's up, everybody?
Bruce, you're getting good with that thumbs up thing.
Well, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So what's going on, everybody? It's time for another exciting and informative and fun Stream Team Beekeeping chat tonight. We'd like to welcome everybody aboard. And we have a fun guest tonight. We have Glade Sessions, otherwise known as the Utah Bee Man, on with us tonight. And I thought we'd start off tonight, just maybe Glade, just take a couple of minutes and kind of introduce yourself to us. Tell us a little bit about kind of where you're from, what you're doing, and obviously we'll dive into some of the beekeeping stuff a little bit later, but just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. And then when Glade's done, we'll go around the horn and kind of see what's going on in everybody's neck of the woods.
Well, I'm Glade Sessions. I live in Roosevelt, Utah. That's in northeastern Utah. We're about 60 miles from the Colorado border and about 60 miles south of the Wyoming border. So we're south of the Uinta Mountains. Mountains are 30 minutes away from me. And I've lived in Utah all my life. I grew up 30 miles west of here, or east of here in Vernal. And just love this area and raised my family here. My wife is Jennifer, and we have 5 kids and 2 grandkids, and we're loving being grandparents. I started beekeeping 2015. I think this is my 10th season doing it, and just absolutely fell in love with it. I started with 2 hives, and like most beekeepers, I lost both my hives the first winter. But the next summer, I didn't just buy 2 more packages and try it again. I bought 20 packages and went straight to 20. I don't recommend it. It worked for me, but it was a hard way to learn. For the next 2 years, I actually didn't lose a hive at all. So I really dove into the whole beekeeping arena. I just absorbed anything and everything I could get my hands on. I didn't really have a mentor out here. In fact, I was looking around for a beekeeping group, anybody to just try to kind of help me. And there just really wasn't anybody in my area. So I dug into the books, into the YouTube videos, whatever I could get my hands on. And I quickly learned that there's some good information out there and there's some not so good information out there. And it's taken me a little bit to kind of sort through what's been applicable for me in my area and what just doesn't work here. Eastern Utah, we're high desert. We're about 5,100 feet. Our temperatures go from, in the winter, we can be 20 below, and in the summer, we can be over 100. And even in the summer, we've been hitting high 90s and 100 several times this summer, but because we are high mountains and we're very, very dry, even during the middle of the summer, we'll cool off at night and we'll be high 50s, low 60s at night. Well, bees will cluster at 55. So our bees go from hot to they almost want to cluster. So they've got to be pretty hardy out here. We get a short bee season, and so you kind of have to be on top of things in order to harvest any honey. If you kind of miss the timing, you miss the honey flow. But since I've started, I've ran into a number of beekeepers out here that were all just kind of struggling, trying to figure out how to make things work out here in this cold climate, cold winter climate and hot summer climate. And so I started holding a beekeeping club and trying to do do beekeeping classes. I've been teaching classes for the last, I don't know, 5-6 years. And currently I'm serving on the Utah Beekeepers Association Board of Directors, and just loving it. It's nice to get out and meet new beekeepers and see how they're doing things and see how they do it differently than I do it. But we can get more into kind of how I do things and why I do it the way I do it. But it's been fun. Got to meet Bruce and Brian and Greg at the Bee Expo. And it's just been fun to kind of get into that community of beekeepers and get to know everybody. And it's refreshing to have somebody else out there that's doing the same thing I'm doing and loves it the way I love it. I was actually out in my bee yard today pulling honey supers, and it took me a whole lot longer than it probably should have, but that's because I get distracted and I'm watching the bees.
Oh yeah.
I like it too much.
Well, I think we could all be guilty of that at times. I'm Glade, and we're glad to have you on tonight. I do think, my wife is from Utah. I went to school at BYU out there in Utah, and it is an entirely different, the bees, the basics of the bees. We talk about this occasionally on here. The basics are the same everywhere you go as far as the way the hive, the parts of the hive and things. But the way you keep the bees on the, I guess you call it the high desert, the high plains of Utah, is just completely different than it is in Ohio or here in Alabama. So it'll be interesting to kind of dive into that a little bit. But before we do that, why don't we go around the horn? We'll start with you, Brian, kind of what's going on in your neck of the woods, and we'll go to Greg, and then I'll take a minute, and then we'll, I guess, see kind of Glade what's going on with your bees right now. You mentioned you're pulling honey supers. I was done pulling honey supers in early July, and so it's a whole different thing between here and there. So take it away, guys. Brian, go ahead. You're muted.
Hello?
There you go.
It's horrible. It's like I literally have never done this before. I just started talking away through the arms back, thinking I was going to relax. I was literally just over checking mine a little bit ago, just because I've been feeding like mad. I think through August, from when I threw the buckets on up until this point now, some colonies have taken 3 gallons of syrup through August. Now it's teetered off. When I filled the buckets the other day, I only had one completely empty the bucket. It was one of the larger colonies, so I expected that they would drain it. But the other ones, they kind of teetered off just because you crack the lid, and I'm just getting that faint smell of the fall flow. So that it's here. I'm looking out and I'm seeing some flowers, but it's just not like quite there yet. So things are okay, better than they have been. I had set up both of my resource hives with queens when I shifted in. I got the queens from Greg recently and introduced those, and they all, and introducing queens at this time of year gets challenging at times. They all did good. I had one blunder where I moved a queen, not knowing it, and put in one of the newer ones. So there was a battle royale there, but I had something else happen that we'll talk about at some point here. I messaged Greg about it, that I've never had happen. At some point today, just say, hey, Brian, let's talk about what you have in mind. And it's something interesting that I never experienced before. But the colonies overall, they're looking strong. Like the last pictures that I sent out, they're very strong. So I'm hoping that by me supplementing them like I did, I'm not setting them up for a disaster, needing a ton of food. But I'm not going to harvest a lot. I'm not planning on harvesting a lot this fall. My strong colonies, if I stack any supers up, I literally am just going to shift that out when I equalize my apiary here, probably in September. So, but things are good. Things are good.
Yeah, you've done a good job this year after you had your difficult start. I think simplifying, getting everything kind of back under control. Brian, you've done a great job with that. Greg, how about Zanesville, Hopewell area up there? What's going on?
Fall's here. Don't let this heat wave fool you. The entire season has been 3 weeks early, but I'm here to say that we are right back on track again. We've got the yellow, the wing stem has been on. The first round of goldenrod has been on, and just the first few early, early mornings, the second flush of goldenrod is starting to creep on, and you can just start to get a little tiny bit of that smell where you're walking out there and you almost smell this buttery, warm, not quite goldenrod yet, but it's prepping. So it's a really exciting time because it's we are officially back on track. We are no longer early, in my opinion, on fall. The cool spell that we had for 7-8 days put the brakes on how fast everything was going. It got so cold, the trees I think started bringing some of that sap down. The maples and things started to turn colors, and then here we are in the 90s, and it is just zapping all the leaves. So I think our color forecast for Ohio is going to be horrible this year, because I think most of the leaves are going to get zapped prematurely. What does that have to do with bees? Well, luckily, the plants that we're still hanging on and waiting on, if whatever moisture they had 3 weeks ago, they're getting ready to show their hand here soon. And from what it looks like, we still are going to get a pretty decent goldenrod flow. If we can get some rain this coming week, 2 or 3 weeks from now, when the last bit of goldenrod and aster is on, it's really going to help. So that's where we're at with our season. Fall's here. We had a beautiful opportunity. Our mite counts were just so beautifully low this year. From zero mites, and we had a handful, maybe just barely at a 2% threshold. And so we treated the ones accordingly. We had a beautiful window for Formics. We put Formic on anything that we needed to bring mites back. We put Formic on, and we're going to take that off next week. Assess queen, assess brood, requeen any old queens. We've got a bunch of yellow dot and even some white dot queens running around out there that just keep somehow slipping by us on the requeen. So we're going to go through, make sure everything has a fresh queen. And then I've got some of these colonies that are just massive, too big. When I say massive, right now they're 3 and 4 or 5 boxes tall, way too big for Ohio for us for wintertime. We're going to get those busted back down into story and a halves, get all those requeens. So we're actually going to be doing splits starting next week, which is outlandish for most folks, but we are doing what we call a downsizing split to right size our colonies for wintertime. That's coming up next. The big monster hive has been broken down. The queen, we found her. What a story that was. We found her. She's isolated. And right now I'm just literally waiting in the wings to do my last rounds of grafts. And it's so hot. I've been trying to push myself to go, okay, just go out there and graft. Just go out there and graft. It's been so hot. The bees are bearding this late in the year. When it gets this hot, this late in the season, you really are pushing your luck when it comes to grafting and take rates and things like that. So I'm trying to drag this out as long as I can. The temperatures cool off just enough. Make sure my cell starters are fat and juicy and ready to take all these, because my main goal right now for grafting is twofold. Number one, get a bunch of daughters made off this monster hive queen, number one. Number two, get a bunch of virgins made so we can continue with our insemination program for the rest of this year. And guys, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. It is beautiful. We are living, the last 2-3 weeks has been, I find myself just in a mode of joy and happiness out here. Even just burying all the work here, all the pressure of high performance the rest of the most of the part of the year is all behind us. And so now I'm really starting to enjoy a lot of the things, a lot of the work. Even got the sawmill fired back up. So I'm really looking forward to this fall and this winter. It's going to be a great year next year. Bruce, what about you? What's the situation in Dothan, Alabama?
Overall, I think the bees are looking pretty good. I had an absolute failure with my grafting that I tried to do a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
So anyway, I'm working on the video now from that 2-week period where I just got overheated one day, and then the video is like 30 something minutes long. I got to just figure out a way to back. I may just cut the queen part out. I'm not sure if I will or not, but it just didn't work out. I think I just couldn't see good enough. I've got to figure out a better system to be able to see better. It was kind of late in the evening. The first time I grafted this spring, I could see quite well. For some reason that night, maybe because I'd been sweating and my eyes were kind of, I don't know if they were a little blurry. I just couldn't tell if I was flipping the larvae. I just couldn't tell. And so anyway, I think the larvae I tried to graft were the right age. I could kind of see them down there, that little C shape, and they were pretty young larvae. But when I tried to pull them out, I just had a hard time.
Yeah.
I got to figure out better how to graft. I don't know if it was the Chinese grafting tool. I have 2 of them, and one of them didn't work very well the first time I grafted, but the other one did, and neither one of them seemed to. I just had a hard time getting them out without them rubbing on the edge of the cell. Like they kept flipping. So I don't know. Anyway, I ended up with a poor take, but I was just playing around with it anyway. I did make a couple of splits. One of the cells, I think, Greg, you said you look from the top. If you see royal jelly, it's probably okay. One of the cells was clear. It didn't have it, so I didn't use that one.
Yeah.
One of them looked the other 2 looked beautiful. One of them, so I made a couple of, what I did was I made splits with a double screen board.
Yeah.
And I figure if they don't take, I'll just recombine them. Won't be a problem. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, that's kind of what's going on here this coming week. And we'll talk about that near the end, I'm sure. I'm going to try some downsizing splits, just try to do a little requeening. I do have some queens coming. We'll talk about that later, maybe. I'm going to try that, just try it again. I'm going to feed like crazy this year, though, Greg. Greg he thinks I'm nuts, but anyway,
what's that Einstein quote, Bruce?
I don't want to.
Never. If you don't,
I don't want to. I don't want to hear it.
You've taken that one to the umpteenth degree. But there's that. What's the Einstein quote there?
I don't even know. I don't know. I don't want to know.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It's along the same line is to do the same thing, but expect a different results. The definition.
I'm doing it different.
Okay. All right.
Different technique. So
we'll
I
talk
hope anyway.
about that later.
So anyway, but I'd like to move on over to Glade there out in Utah. Glade, tell us kind of what's going on with your colonies right now, and then we'll start peppering it with some questions.
Like I said, I just pulled honey supers, and for me, that's a bit late. I like to get them pulled a little sooner than this. Our honey flow has pretty well stopped. The only reason I left them on this year a little longer was driving down the road, I could see a couple of alfalfa fields that were in full bloom. And so okay, let's see if we can capture a little bit of that honey. It's been so hot and dry around here all summer long. We have not had any rain since May and until the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks, we finally got some rain, and the rest of the summer has just been hot and dry. So April looked really good. May was a complete bust for honey. It was cold and windy. And then June, July, August has been just nasty, hot and dry. And just in the last 2 weeks, we finally started to get a little bit of rain. We're in a break right now. So I went out and pulled my honey supers. There won't be any nectar flow to speak of from here on out for us. So I'm going to have to watch my hives really close to make sure they don't eat up all their stores. And if they start digging into their stores, then I'm going to have to feed a little bit. But that's kind of where I'm at. Hives are looking pretty good. My mite counts are a little higher than I want. And I need to get my mite treatments on. I'd like to use Formic, but it's too hot. We're mid 80s to low 90s, and it's too hot. So I'm going to have to switch to something else. I'll probably go to Apiguard, but I'd like the temperatures to back off just 5-8 degrees. If I could get 5 or 8 degrees less, then I think I'd be okay. But that's kind of where I'm at. So whole honey supers. Next chore is to get my treatments on and get them set up, get them ready for winter.
So I think we're already beginning to catch a little pattern with you, Glade, that you have a plan with everything you do. And before we get started in this, really into the kind of the topic of the discussion tonight, which is how to basically simplify and streamline your beekeeping operation for success, which obviously I've already mentioned what I'm doing. And so I haven't simplified. I'm doing the opposite of that, but I'm trying. I can't help myself. I want to get good at everything. So I'm going to try this. But anyway, a story back in it was probably 1990 or 1991. I was fairly newly married, and my wife, I lived in Utah. I was playing football at BYU at the time, but it was in the middle of the winter. I can't remember if it was probably, I don't know if it was, anyways, in the winter time. And my wife was an accountant for a large accounting firm in Salt Lake City. And they sent her on a trip to Roosevelt, which is where Glade lives. And it was bitter cold. And so we headed up and we headed over the mountains. We were headed that direction. I had no idea where I was going, this little mountain road to get up there. And I think the roads are probably better now than they used to be. I'm not sure about that, Glade. But, out in Utah, you're driving through the mountains and they've got all these blizzard, like windbreaks and things all on the roads where the snow, and for anyone who lives in snowy areas where you have blizzards, you understand that it can be horizontal sometimes, not just falling softly on the pines like you hear about in the Christmas songs. But so we were driving along and we got in a situation. I had an old Buick LeSabre rear wheel drive. And we headed up there to Roosevelt after dark one night. And we got up there and we got in a blizzard and the snow was blowing horizontally. My wife and I were in that car. It was bitter cold. I had no idea where I was, little small road. And I really believe that there was some divine help there because there was a car. We saw some taillights ahead of us. And I just put my focus on those taillights, and that car got us through that blizzard. Otherwise, there's no telling because you couldn't see anything. You could barely see the road. You couldn't tell.
Uh-oh.
That LeSabre rear-wheel drive slipping off the road there again.
He fishtailed. He did 12 360s, and if you guys have seen National Lampoons,
way to go, Sparky.
He jumped off of one of the snow drifts over top of the lights, and Bruce, you could pick it back up from there.
Yeah, I somehow hit something on my mouse over here and it popped me off. I'm glad I didn't hit the end stream and just end everything here. But anyway, so we made it out there. It was bitter cold, but I'm going to tell you, Roosevelt, it's a pretty place, but it is out in the middle of literally. When you think of the high mountain desert, that's, if you could just picture that like in movies or whatever, that's exactly what it is. It's pretty rugged out there. But I'm just glad we didn't end up down freezing to death up there. It was pretty scary there for a while. But my wife had a job. I think it was a weekend job, and so we left like maybe on a Friday evening and drove out there, and she worked on Saturday. We drove back. I can't remember what exactly happened. Maybe it was during a holiday season. I can't remember. But anyway, so I guess guys, you guys feel free to chime in however you want. But one thing I've been impressed with is I've watched some of Glade's videos. Is there's a couple things I really like about you, Glade. Number one, well, I mean more than that, but a lot of things, but as far as your beekeeping goes, number one, you told your story earlier about how you got into bees and how there really wasn't anybody around there doing it, or you couldn't find anybody. And so you just kind of decided to learn how to keep bees and then to share your knowledge with others. So the number one thing I think that is critically important about Glade is that he has the heart of a teacher. He has the mind of a teacher. He wants to help other people out. And you've got your methodical, kind of quiet type of way of teaching and sharing. And it's just so soothing, and you do such a good job. You're very specific. You do a great job explaining what you're doing in your videos, everything from your hive management to your queen rearing to just all. You just explain it so well to how you do everything, and you're very fundamentally sound. And the other thing I really am impressed with is that you have really, obviously when you watch your videos, you've kind of have you have a schedule, you have a method of simplification that you have utilized in your operation to make things easier and in order to save, I guess, money, save time, and save energy. And so briefly, and guys, you guys chime in, Brian, Greg, if you have any questions for him as well, but just briefly kind of explain, I think your personality is a very organized personality. I met you when I was in Utah back at my daughter's graduation back last spring. And I believe that you just have that natural, your personality is you're very organized. That's kind of what I gather, which is a very good thing because I'm not. But briefly talk on that a little bit, Glade. Kind of talk a little bit about maybe a couple things that you do to make your life as a beekeeper more simple and easier.
Well, you're right, Bruce. I am. I like things organized. I like things on a schedule. That's just kind of my personality. I am rather quiet, introverted, but I need one of the shirts that say introverted but willing to talk bees, because if you give me talking bees, I can do that. And I can talk for a long time. But my personality, my background is actually accounting. I have a degree in accounting, so detailed oriented. But I've really spent the last 25 years in my career doing IT management and database management. So detailed oriented is really, that is kind of me. I like to get down into the details. And so when I got into bees, I got down into the details and tried to figure out, okay, what works, what doesn't work. And I still work a full-time job. I've been there for 30 years. And if I don't do things in an organized manner, I just don't have time. I don't have enough time for bees and family and job and church and everything else that I do in order to make it work. So I have to kind of put things a little bit on a schedule. I'm kind of on a 2-week schedule for checking bees from the time I can start in about April, clear through October. I try to be out my bee yards about every 2 weeks. That gives me enough time to do what I need to do and make sure the bees aren't swarming on me. And but I really do try to just get really methodical about things and treat every hive pretty much the same. I'm not quite there yet. I still struggle sometimes getting all my hives kind of looking the same and at the same stage. There's always 1 or 2 that are just booming and a couple that are not doing anything. And I have kind of, because I've started raising my own queens the last 5 years or so, even before that, really, it was a couple of years after I started raising my own queens. And since I've been doing that, I see more consistency in my operation, more consistency between hives. I just pick from the best and go with it.
Now, one thing I noticed is that you run all mediums. Talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, you can see in the picture behind me, all my boxes are mediums. That was a choice I made from the beginning. I talked to a few beekeepers, and it just seemed a little odd to me that the standard hive setup would be 2 deeps, a queen excluder, and then medium honey supers. And I just thought, okay, why do we do it that way? And after talking to a couple of beekeepers and talked to a commercial beekeeper out on the Wasatch Front, out in the Provo area, and he suggested try using all the same size boxes. And I thought, okay, that makes more sense for me. Now I can just concentrate on buying one size box, one size frame. I'm not trying to figure out, can I move this frame up or down? And I found it when I started. Yeah, it's a little bit more expensive because 3 mediums is the same as 2 deeps. So yeah, I'm buying an extra box there and an extra set of frames, but it's made things so much easier for me. Today's a perfect example. I went out and pulled honey supers, and I had, once in a while I get this, but I had 2 hives where the queen was above the queen excluder up in my honey super. And I'm like, oh, what are you doing up here? So normally you'd have to just find your queen, get her down below that queen excluder, and then leave that brood to just hatch out. So you're 3 weeks. Well, because my boxes are all the same size, I can pull all that brood out, push it down into the bottom boxes where I want it, and make sure my queen's down there in the bottom. And then I can pull my honey supers. I can pull the frames that don't have any brood in it. And I'm not trying to figure out, well, can I push this brood down or can I not? Because my frame size is the same. I don't even worry about that. I don't even think about that. I can move frames up and down all I want. And for me, that makes it simpler. When I order boxes and frames, I always order the same size. I never try to figure out, oh, do I have deeps? Do I have mediums? What do I have? It just made it easier. It made more sense to me.
Makes sense, yeah.
I've gone down the path also of simplifying. I've said, I think I started saying this last year. I wanted uniformity just throughout the apiary, but for me, I'm not going to mediums. I think I only have 1 colony that's not in a single right now. But then everything is pretty standard, like as far as how I feed. I just really have, just like you, I've simplified a lot, and it's amazing how much more efficient your inspections are, just the whole entire process. That efficiency is just insane when you have that uniform system in place. It is. I agree. Yeah, it's great.
Greg, how about you? What do you do to kind of simplify and keep it more uniform?
Well, after you get tired of tripping over the same thing and booby trapping yourself, and when you finally get to the point to where you accept the fact that a certain thing isn't working and you got to do something else, you eventually move on. I think building uniformity and consistency is literally one of the smartest moves any beekeeper can make. Currently we have here at the home yard, where there's maybe on one of the hillsides here, kind of right behind the learning yard, that you kind of see when you pull into the shop there's maybe, I don't know, 200 colonies or so right there. You can see half of them from one side of the hill and the other kind of roll down the other side. And then in the middle, where the road is kind of like the equipment boneyard. We keep a couple of skids of stuff out there where we kind of keep boxes and lids, extra 4-ways kind of right there in case we need to make a move or whatever. We can just go right to the center equipment aisle and get that. I think we all probably have stashes of equipment kind of, strategically set up in places, so we're not constantly going after this, going after that. And in that equipment row, I've got stuff that, like, it's finally either I'm going to just maybe bring it all up here to the shop and say whoever wants it come gets it, or we're just going to have a big bonfire with it. But there's some things that you move away from. There are certain things that you say, okay, I'm no longer doing this, or I'm no longer using this type of material. I've got piles of old Advantic tops and bottoms and things that just They lasted for like 2 years, maybe 3, and now they're just piles of heavy, soggy garbage, and they're just sitting there. And I'm a hillbilly, and so I like to. I wouldn't say I'm a hoarder. I would say I'm a resource accumulator, and so it's really hard to want to get rid of extra boxes or extra tops or extra bottoms, even if they don't even fit the program anymore. And so one of the things about building consistency and uniformity is accepting the fact that these things no longer have a place in the program. And I like Glade's approach about being an accountant, because we talk all the time about each and every colony is an asset. Each individual unit is an asset. And we're either growing that asset, it's sitting static, or it's depreciating. It's losing in some way, shape, or form. Every square inch, every square foot of your apiary is the same exact thing. And so if I've got a row of equipment that's just sitting there, rotting, doing nothing, it's actually eating up space where I could be doing something more productive and moving the overall program financially more in the black. And so for us, eventually we find things that don't work anymore. They're not creating leverage. It's no longer a force multiplier. It's just there because we just can't pitch it or burn it or get rid of it or do something else. And it's now becomes a liability. So Glade, a question that I have for you is, that all being said, as you've gone and moved to mediums, I kind of have a two-pronged question, tackle them at your leisure there. The first question is selling nukes a part of your financial portfolio in your apiary? And if so, do you feel like only providing mediums has limited you, or have you found a niche market selling medium nukes to your local area? That's the first question. And the second question is, what are some things that you have moved away from to create uniformity in your bee yard?
Let me start with the first one. I have been selling nukes for the last few years, and I have been selling medium nukes. And I've been selling them to people that are running all mediums and people that are running deeps. So, but most people are doing, a deep and a medium hunting supers, deep for the brood. Pretty typical, right? That's pretty normal. But so I have to talk them through and kind of educate them that I'm going to sell you this medium nook. We're going to start this out in your medium honey super, and they'll let them build up into that deep box and put the deep box on top after they've filled that bottom box, and let them move up into that deep box. And then we can start playing with moving things around and getting that medium super back into a honey position above the queen excluder. So it's very doable to do that. Or you can just put it in the deep box and deal with the burr comb, which isn't very fun. But so yeah, selling medium brain nooks is okay. You just have to help the beekeepers understand what they're getting. And I try really hard when I sell a nook to somebody. I tell them multiple times, these are medium frames. These are medium frames. These are not deep frames. Do you have deep boxes or do you have medium boxes? I really try. I don't want to tell somebody, yeah, here's a nook. I'm going to sell you a nook, and them expect it to be all deeps. I never want that to happen. But it's not really a problem. You can do it. And yeah, I sell my nooks just a little bit less than probably what a deep nook, because there's not quite as many bees and there's not quite as much brood. But I try to pack those pro nuke boxes pretty heavy with bees. There's plenty of space underneath those medium frames for a few extra bees. So I'll shake a few extra frames of bees when I sell a nuke. I want to make sure that's a good nuke when it goes out the door. As far as things I've changed over the years, one of the things, when I started, I was running 3 mediums for my brood chamber and no queen excluder, with the idea of that once those bees build kind of a honey dome in that third box, that queen doesn't cross that dome, that honey dome, very easily. She will, but generally not. So I ran with no queen excluders for several years. And I decided, you know what? Three mediums is probably more than enough room for brood. And so now I've switched, and I go down to 2 mediums for my brood chamber, and the third medium is their honey super. When it gets full, it's theirs. That's their honey super. So I've done a couple of things. I go 2 mediums for my brood chamber, and I've added a queen excluder, and then a third medium is their honey super. It stays on the hive all year. You can see in the photos behind me, they're all yellow. I decided to paint all my brood chambers yellow, and all my honey supers are either blue or green or white or something else. So I can look at these and say, oh, there's one honey super on those. The other 3 boxes are for the bees. And as I pull my honey supers out, I'll pull those blue boxes off, and that top yellow box is their honey super for winter, or that's part of their honey super for winter. So I'll pull the queen excluder, drop it back down in the third position, and let them. That third honey super is already full. It's packed, and I want 2 supers, 2 of those boxes to pretty well be packed with honey by the end of September. And the top box is already packed. I let them take that first honey, and I only take the honey after that. But just going down to 2 brood boxes, like Brian says, it makes my inspections so much quicker. I can yank off my honey supers, get right down to the brood chamber. I usually only have to look in that second box, and I can tell whether the queen's good, bad, think something's wrong. I don't usually have to dig down to the very bottom box. Rarely do I have to do that. A couple of frames out of that second box, and I'm good. I can move on, throw the queen excluder back on, throw my honey supers back on. I don't even have to look in those honey supers. I know what's in there. And so that's one of the things that I've changed over the years, and I like it. It made my hive inspections go quicker, so I can get in and get out. The only problem I have is I like to look at the bees, and it slows me down.
No doubt. Stan says, love his organization. I need to hire Glade for a week to organize my bee barn. So,
well, don't look at my shed right at the moment. It's a disaster.
I'm sure disaster for you, Glade, is like be ultra organized for me. So anyway, there was a quick question that Stan did have. He asked, we'll go through that real quick. He said, what frames do you use? I guess he's asking what type of foundation do you use?
I like the Premier Foundation, but I have a lot of man-like frames with Cellrite. And personally, I like the Premier Foundation the best. But if you get a good coat of wax on just about any foundation, the bees will draw it out.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I've tried all kinds of things, but I think that the wax is the most important part. But I do know that anyway, that answered the question. And that's, I know people use all kinds of stuff, and it really depends upon, there's various factors, but I think wax would probably be near the top of that list. Any other questions, Brian, that you see in there?
No, that was the
A lot of people are impressed with the organization, though, Glade. I like the idea of the color-coded honey supers versus brood. that is important, I think, especially since all the boxes are the same size. That's a great way to do it. One of my one.
Yeah.
You know, you can look at that yard and say, "Oh, look, there's 3 honey supers on it."
Yep, you sure can.
I don't even have to think twice. If you can see this hive that's sitting on the ground, kind of in between the other 2 stacks. That hive was sitting up on the hive stand right between the 2. And that's the way it overwintered. So I had 3 of them all stacked right there together. But I like leaving on my hive stands, I've got enough room between the 2 hives to, as I pull off my honey supers, I can stack them right there between the 2 hives. There's enough room to do that. And now I'm not lifting as up and down. I don't have to put it clear down on the ground. I'm not looking for a place to put it. I'm not putting it in the dirt. So my supers all stay up off the ground, and I don't have to lift them quite as far. So that's the other thing I like to do. This hive, since it was in the middle, was kind of in the way, and I set it back down on the ground so that I could move it. So later that night, after I took the picture, I came back and closed the bees up and moved the hive to a different yard. That's why I put it on the ground, just so I could move it. But I like having space between my 2 hives, just so I have a place to off stack my supers while I'm doing an inspection, and then they can go right back on.
Yeah, it looks good. You're not booby trapping yourself like a Alabama beekeeper that I've seen before too, where you've got everything crammed and I get it. I used to do that too, and you would no sooner get something going, you barely, we used to have a minimum rule where we had at least have a minimum of a 1 box width between the colonies, so you always have a place to take stuff off and set it down. But that you have some that you're stacking up, some that you end up having no place to put anything, and then you end up booby trapping yourself. And it's that one time where you knock the one over and they all turn loose on you, and you realize maybe they don't have to be so tight. Maybe I can kind of move them around there. And Glade, as I'm looking at your setup there, what a beautiful landscape that is. Just judging by the how bright that is, it looks like. Let's see. Are those? So, is the trees and that brush? Would that be to your? Let's see. Are you facing south, the front of those colonies?
I'm facing southeast.
Okay.
And my hive entrances are away from me.
Gotcha. Do you find that in the wintertime, in your neck of the woods there, so if you're facing south, so the backs of those are facing southeast, do you find
the front of the hive is facing south? You're looking at the back of the hive.
Okay.
Oh, we're looking at the backs of. I got you. Okay.
And
do you find that so it sounds like you prefer two brood boxes and mediums and excluder, and then or 2 broods and excluder and then a super? Do you pull that? You pull that excluder out for the winter time. Is that about your go-to configurations? Is overall 3 mediums in height?
Yep.
In size? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. What's that, Brian? It's about. I guess it ends up being about a story and a half, doesn't it?
Well, no,
it's a double deep. It's a double deep, isn't it?
It's the same as a double deep. Yeah.
Double deep. Have you found if you go, what we're finding here is in the years past, we've had years where we can overwinter in a 5-frame medium, a 5-frame deep, a 5/5. But what seems to be changing rapidly over the last 3 years is we're not getting by with that anymore, because we're not getting cold. The temperatures are not getting cold and staying cold. And so it's the constant up and down roller coaster temperatures. The bees are constantly breaking cluster, eating, and those smaller colonies, they just burn through everything so quick that we have found that we are a minimum size that not only makes it through the wintertime, because even those small ones, they may make it through, but for whatever reason, those really small colonies, they don't amount to anything, it seems like, in the spring. But a story and a half or a deep and a medium here, those rascals, nearly, and I dare say bulletproof, they seem to do so well through the up and down temperatures that when they come out of the spring, they are jamming. They're ready. They need split. They need another deep brood box. They need super, whatever our goal is for that. Have you found, Glade, that you've got some kind of outlying scenarios with temperature that may affect the overall size of your configuration that you can get by with, that they're colonies that are truly assets that are needing to divide and multiply in the spring? And and if so, is there anything that you find, what are some contributing factors that are throwing success failures coming out of the winter? What are you finding is the right configuration for you, and what are the factors that may throw a wrench into that for you?
Well, I kind of have two sets of hives. I consider these my production hives, my honey production hives, and I really like 3 medium to overwinter in. And my goal is to have those top 2 mediums pretty well packed with honey. I will still, about Halloween, maybe even a little later, I will still put a shim on my hives and put sugar on top of my hives for winter. If you do it too soon, the bees will pack it out. If I put shims on in October, they'll pack it out. If I wait until the end of October, 1st of November, then they'll leave it alone. And it all depends on temperature, like you said. Weather makes a big difference. And our weather out here has just been so unpredictable that 2 years ago we had more snow than we could shake a stick at. I mean, we were shoveling snow. I had to go out and unbury my hives, and we had more snow than we could handle. Last year, not so much. Maybe a couple of years ago, we might go down here in the valley. We might go all winter and not hardly have any snow down here in the valley. So it's rough. Utah's been in a real drought for a number of years, and the last 2 years, we've just started to kind of break out of that. Growing up as a kid, I remember snowbanks up and down the roads, that were 3 feet all the way, everywhere. And nowadays, we don't see that as much. And so I really have to watch my hives through winter. If we have a really warm fall and it stays warm clear into November, maybe even into the first part of December, if it stays too warm, those bees will burn through their stores. There's nothing to forage on, but they're active, they're out flying because it's warm enough, and they will burn through those stores quicker than, man. So I have to really kind of watch what the weather's doing. And that's part of the reason I add a sugar shim. It's insurance, 5 pounds of sugar, that's kind of insurance for me. And some years the bees hardly even touch it. And when I started, I didn't know whether to run Italians or whether to run Carniolans. And so I ran 10 Italians and 10 Carniolans. And I quickly noticed the difference. The Italians will just eat themselves out of house and home. They would come out of winter. They looked really good. They had a great population, but they didn't have any food left. They'd burn through everything. And the Carniolans, man, they'd come out of winter. I got a little 5-frame cluster that just doesn't look like they're going to make it. And you wonder what they ate all winter long, because I've still got a honey super and the sugar shim they haven't even touched. Over the years, I've grafted off my best hives, and sometimes that's been a Carniolan, and sometimes that's been an Italian. It's interesting those carniolans come spring, they explode. And that little 5 frame that you didn't think was going to make it past March, by the end of May, I can't tell the difference between the 2 hives. They have completely caught up and sometimes surpassed the Italians as far as brood. So for me, winter is kind of tricky. I have to watch the weather, and if it goes cold, if we stay below 40, the bees hole up, they're great. If we stay in that low 50 range and during the day and the bees are out flying, they'll burn through their stores. So I kind of have to watch that really close in the fall and make sure that they're not eating their winter food.
Yeah, that's that's good stuff. I know Greg is all about those Caucasian, those dark queens. Quick question for you here. I wanted to talk a little bit more about queens here in a minute, but Gary Stewart says he asked, it looks rather dry there. What do the bees normally forage on out there?
It is rather dry here. It's dry. This picture is early, probably April, if I'm not mistaken. I think this was maybe mid-April-ish, maybe a little bit later. Like I said, this year, April was really good. We had some nice warm weather. The trees were blooming. And so I stacked a honey super on. They needed room. Around here, there's not much. We get, first thing in the spring, we get the typical fruit trees and a little bit of maple pollen, not much. Willows, quite a bit of that. But typical, I guess, spring flowers. Once we hit into the summer, there's really not too much. Most of what my bees are foraging on is alfalfa and wildflower, sunflower. The trees that you can see in the background, those are, they haven't even bloomed out yet. So I'm pretty sure this is mid-April-ish. Most of the big trees on the horizon, those are probably poplars. I can't really tell. But the smaller trees in the foreground, those are Russian olives. And the Russian olive, there's tons of them around here. They're like a weed. And when they bloom, they produce quite a bit of pollen and some nectar. So, but the window's short. You got about a week of really nice bloom there with the Russian olives. Somebody asked, is that a mesquite tree? Nope, no mesquite trees around here. We'll get cottonwoods and poplars, some pine, but it's really tough. There's not tons of forage around here, just natural forage. Other than the typical weeds, there's some mustard weed around here. What's blooming right now is called gumweed. Pretty yellow flower, but not much, little pollen there. Sunflower, there's some natural sunflowers, just wild sunflowers growing. But yeah, forage is kind of tough around here. Interestingly enough, my area back in the early 60s, 70s, there were a couple of commercial beekeepers in the area, and one of them's still here. The family's still here, and they're still doing bees. They've done it for generations. But my area used to be quite well known for some of the best honey around, just a really nice flavored honey. And that's because there were a lot of farmers around here that used to raise alfalfa for seed, so they purposely let it go to bloom. And because of that, the commercial beekeeper, he could man, they made bank off that. They could make tons of honey because there were acres and acres and acres of alfalfa that was purposely let bloom. And that alfalfa honey was just, it's mild, it's not strong, but to me, it's some of the best honey. We don't get that much anymore. Most of the growers out here want to cut that alfalfa just about the time it starts to bloom because the protein content's at that point the highest, and that's what they're looking for cattle and feed.
Yeah, it's it's pretty rugged and tough out there. That's one reason I thought it'd be kind of neat to have you on, because I know it's a tough go out there. It's rough enough down in the Salt Lake Valley, down in the valleys where they've got a lot of irrigation. They've got people. They've got more blooming down like in the valleys and stuff, but up there where you're at, you can just tell by looking behind you, it's pretty desolate. I will say that my favorite honey on the planet is the alfalfa / clover honey, which I think you gave me a sample of. I guess that's kind of what that creamed honey you gave me was. And my favorite honey in the world is the honey from Cox Honey up in Shelley, Idaho. And they say that that's alfalfa / clover honey.
Yeah.
And that little jar you gave to me, Glade, tasted almost identical to that. And it was really good. And so for those who haven't experienced alfalfa honey, it's just so good to me. It's just really good stuff. But the problem is, like you say, Glade, they prefer to mow it before it really blooms, or prefer to harvest it before it really gets into full bloom, which is good for the livestock, but it's not good for the beekeeper when it's about to bloom and they mow it all down and harvest it.
Just about to turn purple. When that field's just got a hint of purple on it, wow.
Yeah.
And if they'll leave it for 3 or 4 more days, you can make a super of honey off of it in 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, it's so good.
They'll bring it in, but
well, this chat's been it's really good. And that's, once again, one reason I wanted to have you on. Before we move on, I wanted to bring up something with all three of you guys that I'm not good at, that all three of you guys are good at. But before we move on, Glade's channel is Utah Bee Man, Glade Sessions on YouTube. And once again, Glade is very, very good with his approach, very simple. He keeps everything real simple in his videos. He explains everything extremely well. And so I think he has a lot of really good basic beekeeping principles, regardless of what size configuration you want to have your boxes in. And Glade, you obviously use all mediums, but you don't preach that you have to do that.
Oh no!
But the beekeeping fundamentals are just so spot on with, when to do this, when to do that. Kind of how to set up your cell builder, how you graft and things like that. And just, like you said, you really want to help other people succeed in your area. You've established a bee club and a beekeeping class there. And so you're kind of just carrying that over to your YouTube channel. So I'd encourage everyone to go check out Glade's channel at Utah Bee Man on YouTube. And I think you'll like it, and give him a subscribe. It's a channel you're getting on there in the hundreds of subscribers. You got about over 400 subscribers now, but like to see if we could help. I think you have a lot to offer, and if we could hit that algorithm a little bit, I think it could help a lot of people out. So go check it out, everybody, and see what you think. But the next thing I want to do is kind of a question for all three of you, because I know I drive Greg absolutely crazy because I always say I want to simplify and make things easier. And then I go out and do crazy stuff. I just go out and do something totally off the wall, just nuts, that doesn't simplify anything. And so one of the things that I've heard all three of you talking about this evening is queens, and the simplicity of, well, really, I know that Greg and Glade, you guys both raise your own queens. And Brian, I know that you've kind of consolidated your bee source, your queen source, down to the guy on the screen right there to the side of you there. So speak a little bit to the quality or the importance of having a consistent breed of bee, or maybe breeding from your own stock. Brian, why don't you start off with that, since I know that you've kind of adjusted your queen situations. So you kind of speak to that a little bit. I don't have any room to talk because I've got everything from the bright yellow Cordovans all the way down to jet black, Michael Palmer / Greg Burns type queen. So I got everything in between.
Let me shine these up for a second. That way I look, like I know. There we go. Look at that. See? So I'll say I'm not looking to have, as someone who was in our chat before said, I'm not looking to have any Franken queens. I just found, probably, I'm trying to think, it's been 2 or so years ago, 3 years ago, where I found that, I was jumping at this fad's going on and people are talking about this, and you see videos and people are talking about this, and so I'm like, oh, let me go over there and get some of that and bring it in here, and let me go get some of this and bring it here, and I just found that on my journey towards uniformity, by me, yes, I'm going in the direction of having uniform equipment and uniform practices. But if I don't have uniform bees, what good is it? That's just at least what I have found. And we all know different bees, they do different things as far as consumption, just their behavior, everything about them. Biology is biology with bees and the different types of bees. And I found that not having a consistent type of honeybee in my apiary presented a challenge, because going from one colony to the next down my 2 rows, it could be completely different, because this colony here was a Caucasian, this one here was an Italian, this one here was a Saskatraz, this one here was a Carney. And it's like, what in the heck is going on? So, yes, I've been going the direction towards the Caucasians. I really like them. Their temperament, everything about them has been good. Up until this year, they were producing honey for me as well. So that was pleasant. But this year has just been a challenge altogether. It's just, this year's a whole separate talk. But as far as the queens, I mean, one day, will I try my hand in grafting? I don't know. I can't I don't know. What I have available, and my situation is a little bit different. I don't know if there's anyone, Glade, around you that has a solid stock that you can just, you can always rely on. And Bruce, down in your area, there's really, I think that's a challenge in your area. With me, I'm fortunate in that 2+ hours away, I have Greg, where I get my stock from. So, the benefit there is they're handpicked. They never travel in a jet. They're not getting shipped across the country through who knows what conditions. They're not going through USPS, where USPS the one time had my queen bees on their truck, and when I saw that it was out for delivery, I called and reamed the office out, and they got the my mail courier to bring them back, so I don't have to worry about any of those issues where it's hot out and they're going to be baked because the carrier would have put them in my mailbox. But I've just found, for me, that to continue with my journey of uniformity, having only one type of bee as far as breed, it's worked. And I've really noticed this year, though, too, like, even with temperament, my mom has commented, and we know all of my colonies are over at her property. And when there's times where I'm requeening and doing things where, the bees are just going to be a little bit angry just because they're not in, as I say, homeostasis. Mama's not there, or, this big giant hand came in and squeezed mama's head. So, we've got to make a new one. And where temperament is going to be a little bit elevated, I haven't seen that. So it's going in a direction that I'll be curious as to what next year holds. But it's really helped out in my yard. And that's, again, it's just in my yard. I'm not saying that everybody should only have one type of bee. Who knows? I'm just a joker in Northeast Ohio that is trying to keep colonies alive. So,
Greg?
Uh,
In 4.5 minutes or less.
There's no way, and it would be a disservice to Glade to get fired up and let her rip from the pulpit here. But I think that I've got so much to say about this. I've got so much that's bursting on the inside that I'm working on my breathing technique to just calm down, cowboy. What Brian just said there was absolute gold. We don't have time to get into it, Bruce. I would be going on a long story long. In short, folks don't realize what they're doing to their apiary. They don't realize what they're doing to the future of their apiary with this mix and match technique of I'm going to grab this, I'm going to grab this, I'm going to grab this, I'm going to grab that, I'm going to bring it into the apiary, and I've got this boutique smorgasbord of offering. Yes, they're all honeybees, but no, they are all different. Mm-hmm. So many folks are putting all this time and effort into bringing in virgins and getting half of the equation, and they have no intention or opportunity or haven't developed skill set yet to even trial out this virgin, get it mated, get it here, and then get it to where you see an F3 or an F4 daughter off it to see what kind of consistency or uniformity you have, let alone what is she doing? What are the workers doing? What are these daughters doing? And so many folks are bringing all of this in, all these different queen types, all these different attributes, all these different characteristics. Glade talked about it. It was spot on. You got Italians that want to do a certain thing, yet Carnies that want to do something different. You got Caucasians that yet are different even from that. You've got Buckfast, you've got Russian, you've got the Saskatraz, you got the who knows whatsies. You're never going to achieve any kind of uniformity or any kind of consistency with this mix and match smorgasbord approach. You will never be able to sort through it all and figure out what is truly working for you and what's not. You bring in 40 queens of 4 different types, and you put them in one outyard, and half of them overwinter, and they come out of the spring, and they're throwing drones, and they're ready to swarm. Yes, diversity is important. And the polyamorous nature of drones and that kind of semen diversity with the queen, yes, that's important. But what folks don't realize, if they would spend more time keeping their bees alive, working with the stock that they have, breeding from the very best in their own yard and starting there first and building out a legacy yard from that, they would be well ahead, so much further ahead if they would spend the time and work to do that than to think that the grass is greener on the other side and constantly bringing in all of this other stuff. It is my firm opinion that's not the way it works. We have been extremely limited on what stock that we have brought in here. And when we did bring stock in here and mix that with ours, it wasn't 2 or 3 or 4 or 10. It was hundreds of opportunities to create enormous saturation of specific genetics. We don't have time to get into it. And truth be told, it's way above my pay grade to speak to elegantly. But when you get into heritable traits, when you get into attributes, when you get into alleles, when you actually get into which traits are following a paternal side, which traits aren't, which traits can actually be fixed from generation to generation, you've got a mess on your hands if you're bringing in too much stock because you haven't figured out you yet. You've got to spend time to put the work in to create the consistency and the uniformity and say, hey, with this stock, I can achieve this result over this many years in a row. And once you dial that in, you say, okay, now here's where I want to steer the ship. I want something that broods a little bit less, or I want them to brood down or be a little bit more cold hardy, be a little bit more frugal. Or hey, maybe you say, I want bees that are ready to rip and roar, and they're snorting and ready to rock and roll to go to the almonds. I need them to brood up faster, hot and heavy. I'll put feed on them. You've got to know what it is that you need out of these bees and start to tailor your program there. If you bring too much stock in from all these different diversity is important, but too much diversity, I believe, will set you back potentially a decade. Because if one of these queens start throwing aggression, or they start throwing these unknown factors in, and they start throwing drones, and those are constantly being mated with your stock, you're going to be chasing your tail for years to come until you finally get all that rinsed out of your stock. Start with where you're at. Yes, it's important to bring in some stock if you're going to use it for grafting material and you're going to build a baseline from, but you've got to start with you first. Build the consistency, build the uniformity, know what it is that you're actually doing with these bees first, and then start moving the ship in that direction. I wasn't going to get fired up, guys. I'm going to stop there.
No,
I kind of, when I asked the question, I knew what was going to happen.
That all makes sense, though,
me up.
because if you think about it, and if there's anybody out here that and is listening, and I'm sure there is, if there's anybody that's in like first year, a second year, third year, whichever it is, if each of your colonies is a different type of bee, if you have a Russian, if you have an Italian, if you have a Caucasian, because of the behaviors that are pre-programmed into each of those type of bees, you're going to see different colony sizes. You'll see different feeding patterns. You'll see differences. And if you are new and don't know, well, this bee here does this, and that one does this, and that one does this, you're going to sit there and you're going to be scratching your head like, what in the heck is going on? Because that one over there, this Italian thing, it's a beast. And then I'm over here and gosh, why is this one so small? And what, so then you might start thinking, well, I need to requeen that one, and I need to. So you'll end up running circles around in your apiary. And for me, the uniformity has been just
Nice.
key.
Glade.
Take it, Glade. Glade, take it away from
Follow up with
us.
that.
Please take it away, Glade.
I think you have a similar principle though from what you were describing. You kind of found what you liked, and you've.
I do. I agree with Greg. Local stock is where that's where it's at. I've tried some Saskatraz. I've tried bringing in some bees from other places, and honestly, I had a hard time keeping them alive because they didn't act the same way as my local stock did. I did bring in a few of Corey Stevens' queens. I like what Corey's doing. I like that mentality of, okay, let's find a local stock that has some traits that we're interested in. Interestingly enough, Corey Stevens' queens, when they mate with whatever is out here, they turn into really ornery, spicy, grumpy bees. They were horrible. They chased me out of my garden. And I finally I had to just say, okay, no, that's not what I want in my stock. And I do have a commercial guy out on the Wasatch Front, out in the Salt Lake area, that raises some really nice bees. And I will pull some bees from him once in a while, some queens, just queens. Once in a while, if I'm making some splits and I don't have enough queens. But I know what his stock is like, and it's hardy, and it's good stock. But for the most part, I prefer my own stock. I know what my stock is like, and I think I'm starting to get kind of a mix between the Italian and the Carniolan. I still see bigger clusters going into winter, but they seem to be overwintering on less as I've picked out of the best from my yards. And I watch them pretty close through the winter, who's eating what, who's out of stores come February, who's still got stores in February and still has a nice population of bees. I'm watching those things, and I'm picking my queens that I graft off of from the best of the best. They're still gentle, they're still nice. I pulled honey supers, and I just had nitrile gloves on. And I pulled my honey supers off, got down in the brood nest, pulled the queen excluder out, made sure the queen was laying, and they were pussycats. Just even this time of year, there's very little for them to forage on. They had every reason to be grumpy, and they weren't. I like that. So that's what I watch. That's one of the things that I watch for. Gentleness. Are they productive? Do they overwinter well? Around here, if they don't overwinter well, man, that shows pretty quick, usually about January, because they don't make it. Our temperatures are up and down and cold, and we might get a warm day in January. That warm day, 32. We might break freezing.
Wow.
Once, twice from middle of December to end of January, first part of February, we might break freezing. But we'll go 3 weeks and be single digits.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a different world out there. I mean, I know some folks out there. I mean, in certain parts of the world, it's like that, but down here, where even if it does freeze, we're never more than a couple of days from like a day in the 50s or 60s, and so it might get down to, heaven forbid, the upper teens, and then 3 days later we're at 53 or something like that. So it just, but it does create its own set of problems, like you mentioned before, Glade. If it gets too warm, the clusters break, and then they just fly out to the stores, and so it's just a whole different ball game. But I wanted all three of you guys to talk about that, because obviously I am not very good at that. I have done everything to probably go opposite that trend. I need to do better. I've just, one thing that I have not done a good job of, and I tried really grafting seriously for the first time in many years this year and had pretty good success earlier in the year. It's just a matter of trying to time everything with the grafts for me. And it worked out good for me that time, but I need to do better about being able to graft some of my own queens. And I actually stepped out on that limb a little bit this year and did it. And, but I get to the point to where I feel like I need queens, and I just order them in, and I've had pretty good success over the years doing that. But I mean, I've kind of whined on here about how I wish my bees were more consistent. And then Greg's like, well, I know he's thinking in my mind that if you just be consistent with your stock, you wouldn't have this problem. And so, and I'll call Greg and we'll talk for an hour, and he's like, and we try and get some things figured out. And then I go and do not always the opposite, but sometimes the opposite, or I don't do exactly what he recommends. And so, it's one of my biggest problems is I like the traits of both. I like the traits of the Italian type bees, Italian Cordovans, because I do like them to be strong going into spring, especially if I need to make splits. I like to be in February, March, April, ready to make splits right then. But then again, they eat all the food. And so I like the traits of the Carniolans and the Caucasians and I guess Russians. I know they're kind of all related somehow, but I like the traits of those type of bees, the darker bees, because I like them to be frugal in the wintertime, and they do explode, and then they do a good job with honey. And so, of course, when I was doing almonds, I needed to be strong in the middle of the winter, but I'm not doing that anymore. And so I'm still trying to determine exactly what I really like. That's my problem. I'm a multiple personality person. I'm a multiple personality beekeeper. So Greg and I will be talking more later. I actually wanted to talk to him. I wanted to call him tomorrow and talk to him about some of these things. And he's gonna be. I know you're disappointed in me, Greg. He's real disappointed. See him hanging his head right there. He's like,
"You've been warned, Greg."
I've been trying to tell you. I've been trying to tell you, and then you go out and do this. But anyway, so we're getting up kind of towards the end of the video here.
No, we're
Greg,
not.
Brian, Greg or Brian, do you have any more comments or thoughts here? Any
Oh,
questions
I've got
for
lots of
Glade?
thoughts and comments, but I don't
No,
think that we've got time to get into that.
I had something happen today that
Hey, Brian, is your video froze for everybody, or is it just me?
It's
Oh, I
frozen
don't
for me too. It's been frozen for about
Stop your cam and
15
get
minutes.
back on there.
really.
Yeah, your mouth's wide open, and there's like a little booger or something hanging out of the one side there.
There's not. I'm looking at it.
There
we
it
go.
is.
Look
Show
at that.
enough.
Look at that. Show enough. Is it good now? Let me see.
No, you're still frozen.
What?
It's
okay.
almost like you took a screenshot of yourself and there's a picture there is what it looks like.
How do I? Do you want me to leave it as show enough?
No, it's
Now you
okay.
can come back on.
You do you, Brian. That's kind of weird.
That is. What did I do?
It's all right. What were you going to say before I rudely interrupt you? My apologies, Brian. Well, that didn't help it either.
There you are. What'd you do?
I just cycled through my cameras. I don't know. Weird.
Why
So
is it working?
I go over. Well, your one hand is jacked up, Bruce. That's why it doesn't work.
Brian, that's a low blow, man. Come on.
The thumbs work.
I can't help it. I'm
See,
missing a
look.
finger. Just can't help it. Anyway, go ahead, Brian. Finish your thought.
So I go over, like, I recently got queens from Greg, and it was the discussion about introducing queens this time of year with a dearth, everything like that. So I go through and I do my due diligence about a slow release, and I set up in my front row a resource hive. I have one in my back row also, and in the front row I had moved queens up there because I didn't want to pinch them. That way, if there was an acceptance issue, well, I have the queen that came from them. I'll just move it back. So I went over, it's been a couple days ago, and I refreshed the syrup. I put new little teeny squares of pollen patties out and, just replenish the supplements, and everything's hunky-dory. Everything's fine. I go over there today and I look and I see zero activity from my front resource hive. I pulled the lid. I didn't even have a jacket or nothing on yet. I just pop up the lid, absolutely nothing. And I'm like, well, okay, I mean, whatever. So I go back to one of my colonies that I had moved a 2023 queen from that I did see. I saw her in there, the pink dot, saw eggs, so she was starting to go. And my thought today was I'm going to go in there and just take a quick peek at the pattern just to see what she was doing. And I look in there, my queen with the red dot is back in there.
Hmm.
And I'm like, you stupid. I just, I've never had that happen where literally I'll pull a split and now granted it was 20 feet away and literally like they all went back. Like it's been 9 days later.
The rule of beekeeping is that everything is absolutely the same all the time. It's loaded up with absolutes. That's Greg's favorite thing, is how absolutely certain you can be when you're dealing with bees.
Yes.
Isn't that right, Greg?
Brian, run us through that scenario there. I'm not sure I'm picking up what you're putting down.
So,
you got a resource hive. What does that mean to you?
When I got my queens from you, and that's been 10 days ago, I pulled splits and I moved my old queen from my back row up to the front.
Okay.
Just to put them in a resource hive. That way I can just, more or less, it was just to bank them because like my knucklehead self did last year, I killed queens and then I was up a creek. So I figured, well, I'm going to bank them. And if things go wrong with my acceptance, I'll just combine them back. So I
You moved the queen up to the front row.
moved the queen up to the front.
What went with her?
I put like 2 frames of brood in there, a frame of stores, and then I just gave them an empty frame. You
Okay.
know, put
So
some.
we'll lean 3 to 4 frames of bees, probably. It sounds like.
Yep.
And what was back home?
Back home, it was the full colony that I let it go. It was like a day or so, and then I went and I put the new queen in. And well, I taped it.
Okay.
So let it sit a couple days, and then I went back over, went through it, crushed down. You know, I did see a couple little cells that were getting developed, crushed all that down, pulled the tape off of the cage. Okay. I go back a couple days after just to pull the cages out, saw the new queen walking around.
Okay.
Saw her. She was released, walking around. I see eggs, and I'm like, we're good. So today, when I went over, the goal of today was to just, because it's been, you know, she's been in there going on a week. It's probably, I don't know, she's been out 6 or 7 days, somewhere in there. You know, it's hard to say when she got out of the cage, but I'm thinking, well, I just want to look and see how the pattern is looking, because by that point you'll see the young larvae and things like that. And when I look in there, I see the red dot queen.
When did you actually ever see the red dot queen in the front row?
Yes.
You did see her in the front row.
I was actually patting myself on the back because that resource hive had 2 queens in it. Like, it had 2 small colonies. And I was sitting there and I'm thinking, this is great, because if I run into any issues, I can just combine out and equalize. No. They decided that
she ended up flying back with, as you're losing. So in that front box, the only thing left was emerging brood and a handful of bees, probably.
Yeah.
So they all got the memo to fly back home.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't have time tonight. Whose channel is it on next week?
That would be
yours.
Nature's Image Farm.
Maybe next week's show is going to be downsizing splits and late season requeening techniques, because there's a few things that you just said there I've got a lot of thoughts on, and a lot of folks are going to be doing something similar. We've got a round of queens that are going to be available for pickup this coming Friday and Saturday, and we may have some again next Friday and Saturday. So we'll talk next Wednesday on our channel about downsizing splits and re-queening techniques for late in the year, because it is not for the faint of heart, but it is absolutely achievable, and it's possible. If it wasn't, there's no way in the world we would have the number of bees that we do. You can do it. You can absolutely do it, and a lot of times it is the smartest thing that you can do. We'll talk about that. I've got a lot of thoughts on that, Brian. Awesome. But what a fun story. And I'll just tease you too. There is this little thing called an usurpation swarm, and that's a whole other scenario.
What?
So we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we can't. Well, I think we need to probably begin to wrap this thing up, guys. Yeah. I'll go ahead and talk about kind of what's going on here. We've discussed a little bit already, and then Brian will go to you, then we'll let Glade kind of wrap it up from his end, and then Greg will let you bring it home. So really don't have a lot. I'm going to just try and do some late season splits and downsizing, requeening stuff this coming weekend. But beyond that, I'm about done for the year. Going to be doing a lot of feeding this year probably. So Greg, I'm going to call you tomorrow and we'll talk about some of this stuff so you can chew me out. You can give me a lecture, and then you can give me a pep rally at the same time. And, but really, as far as the YouTube channel goes, I've got a video that's going to be coming up. It's probably going to be pretty long. It's 2 days worth of work that it kind of all is connected, and I'm not sure if I need to break it into 2 or just put it into 1. I think I'm going to try and do it all. I'm going to try and get it down to a reasonable length, but there's a lot of stuff going to be packed into that, including the results of the mite washes from the Auburn test, as far as the varroa resistance mites and or the amatraz resistant mites. Also did some we I met a guy that came down from north of Atlanta to buy some honey from me. It's about, I think he said 4.5 hours away. He bought 5-gallon buckets. We talked for a while, get to meet him on the video. Talk a little bit about getting overheated and how you need to not do that. And then come back a week later, 6 days later, and kind of finished up some of that. Then I did try to graft, and I think I'm going to try to include all that in the video. And the results of graft were not good. I'll tell you that up front. Anybody who's on here can see, you'll know the end of the story with that perspective. So it's going to be kind of a video that's basically kind of August beekeeping, what I've been doing in August here, and gotten a lot of work done the last few weeks. But mainly just the hives overall are looking quite well. The colonies are. One thing that is interesting though, and I wish I would have videotaped this. I think we talked about it last week. Maybe we did. I can't remember if we did or not, but I was out at the Midland City Bee Yard, and I haven't had the beetle problem I've had in the past few years. I've been using some Grub-X around the colonies all year. I'm actually using some beetle traps and towels where I feel like I need them. And so far this summer, it hasn't been the typical problem. Now, I never say it hasn't been a problem, because in this area, it can happen in a hurry. But we were out there at the Midland City Bee Yard where we did a bunch of splits back in the spring, and a couple of those splits, they did okay. But then they actually made some honey, I think, those new splits. And then I pulled one of them forward. I haven't been out there in a few weeks, and I have never seen as many beetles as I saw on that bottom board ever in one place. And they were all mature beetles. Normally when you have a hive beetle slime out or dead out, there's a lot of beetle larvae down there, and it looked like little maggots, but there were very few of those. It had to have been thousands of beetles. So I'm just going to tell you, it was, in a sick sort of way, it was kind of fun. I got my torch out, my propane torch out. I turned that sucker on, and I just fried them. And those hive beetles are pretty tough, but when you hit them with that heat from a blowtorch, it's instant. They were in piles laying there. It was that's kind of a sick thing, but it was kind of fun to see those things belly up. Just thousands of them within just a few seconds. I didn't video it though. I should have. That would have been kind of a fun video to do. It could have even been a short or a reel or whatever. And then I tilted the kitty corner. That was another colony that was very similar, and it too was a slime out, but it was the typical slime out with larvae squirming around. Of course, I got the old torch out on those two and destroyed them. But the rest of the colonies out there that day, I didn't see a lot of beetles, but for some reason, those two had just been, they were just in bad shape. So anyway, I thought that was interesting, a little thing I saw out there. But as far as Bruce's Bees goes, we're at kind of I've got a lot of work to do this weekend, and then it's going to kind of slow down for a while, mainly just going to be checking weights, making sure some of these new queens take, seeing what happens there, and just starting to get ready, really getting ready for 2025. That's what we're doing right now. I do still have a few of the strips that I got in late this summer I got to pull, and I'll do that as I'm going through them this weekend. It won't be a problem as I get into those colonies, because those are some of the ones I'm going to really be going into to try to get some of these queens. Some of them are a little bit weak. Some of them I'm just going to play around with those a little bit. So that's what's going on here. And Brian, how about you, man?
Well, I tell you, as far as YouTube videos, I've been slacking in the last 2 weeks. So I think it was just like a culmination of everything that's gone on, with wedding and just everything like that. And then the wife and I went up and we were on a little island on Lake Erie this past weekend. So just kind of recovering and recouping and kind of getting everything, straight in my head. Just getting that rest, but I'll get back at it. I have some footage that I filmed, and I literally the one day I was just over there and I needed to get work done, and I'm filming a video also, and it just got to the point where I'm like, stop the video. I need to get this work done so that I can get back to the house and, get the stuff that I had to do out here. So I just stopped. I was about 3/4 of the way done, and I just stopped. So, but I think I can get a video put together. I think I can go over and make something out of it. I mean, I know I can, but I'll have some stuff coming up here shortly. So, but I'm just going to get back into the grind. I've got another market here coming up in another week and a half. So September 7th is the next market. So looking to sell off some more honey. So what honey that I do have. So
Awesome.
But things are good. Yeah.
I will, before we jump into Glade, I will say, I forgot to mention, I did make a quite expensive, but I think it's going to be a really good purchase. I bought a Thorn wax melter, double jacketed, 25 gallon. Excited about it. I got the thing all set up, and so I actually, Jeb's taking care of me. The heating element didn't work, so it was warm, but it didn't get hot enough. So he's got me a new one. I think if it's not here right now, it'll be here tomorrow, and that's going to be a fun video. And that thing, I'm so excited. If you've watched my videos in the past, I've got some pretty effective ways to take care of my wax. I've tried everything, and I get good clean wax, but it's such a hassle. But this thing, I'll be able to get it all done pretty quickly. So Glade, kind of take a minute just to, first of all, we appreciate you coming on tonight and being a part of this. We don't get to hear from a lot of people out there in Utah. We have you, we have
Bracken. Bracken Parker.
Yeah. I had another name in my head because he commented earlier, Glade. So yeah, Bracken. I was thinking of Jason Egan. He met with us for lunch that day, and he said he watches your videos, Glade, to be able to do a lot of what he does. And there's just not a lot of folks out there in the Utah, in the Intermountain area, that are doing videos. I know we got Brian over at Flower Street there in Colorado. Mm-hmm. We've got you, we've got Bracken, and there's just a very few. And so I think your stuff is very valuable. People need to find you. And I wanted to do this video with you tonight for two reasons. Well, one was because I think you're doing a tremendous thing with the way you keep bees. And number two, I did want to give you some exposure so folks could check you out. And I think you have a lot of good things to offer to the beekeeping industry as a whole. And we appreciate you coming on tonight.
Thank you, Bruce. I really appreciate the invite. It's been fun. Anytime I can talk bees, I enjoy. So it's been fun. And that is one of the reasons I started the YouTube channel. I'm pretty introverted. I'm pretty stay at home and keep to myself. So doing a YouTube video, I have to push myself out of that comfort zone a little bit. And but like you said, there was not very many people out here in the Intermountain West doing YouTube videos, and beekeeping's local. We all know that. We all know it's local, very local. Mm-hmm. And what I do may not quite apply to everybody. Jason's on the Wasatch Front, Jason Egan, and Bracken's a little north of Jason. Their season starts about 3 weeks before mine does. So Jason, if you're trying to follow me, you're behind. And that's just the way it is wherever you go. But hopefully hopefully people watching can gain a little bit of ideas and adapt what I'm doing to your local area. And that's really my purpose, is give you something else, a different way of doing things. And maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. That's fine. I don't preach that in fact, I tell my classes, there's more than one way to keep bees. I'm going to show you how I keep bees. Now adapt it to your goals, your style, what you're trying to get out of your bees. And you're probably going to end up in a little different spot than I am, even if you just live right down the road from me. And I think that's great.
That's right.
So,
well, thanks, Jim.
Letting me come on and join everybody, and it's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, once again, folks, go check out his channel, and I know you'll like what you see, but if you like what you see, and I'd encourage you to go ahead and sign up and just watch some of Glade's videos. He's got some really just good stuff. And Greg, before you bring it on home, I'd like to say thank you for the super chat earlier this evening, and Brian, you as well. Thanks so much. Those do mean a lot. We do put a lot of work. Anyone who does YouTube videos, many of you in the chat tonight, and all four of us know how much work goes into it. So we appreciate this. And then of course, Bracken, thanks so much. Bracken's channel is different than Glade's, but it's awesome. I think it may have been his most recent video. His 9-year-old son did a video, And he actually had the mic on with the bee suit, went through a couple of hives, and it was just really, really good, and it was fun. And so it's just kind of cool to see the way everybody's doing stuff, and to see some of the young stars, not just, the YouTubers, but the YouTubers' kids. In that case with Nash, that was just really fun to watch. I watched it this morning. I think it was this morning. And anyway, folks are doing a good job out there. But Greg, why don't you just go ahead and bring it on home tonight for us?
Well, Glade, thanks again for joining us tonight. As Bruce said, the check's in the mail for your appearance fee, so make sure you cash that as soon as it gets there. But and as all serious, thanks for sharing what you do in Utah. It's always interesting to, kind of tune in to see what somebody else is doing somewhere else. What's interesting about it is, whether we're talking about the race of bees, the type of boxes that we use, what kind of wax melter we prefer, what kind of hive tool is our favorite. A lot of folks look at that as there's all these differences, but when it really comes down to it, there is more that unifies us. There is more that we have in common than we do that's different, and that's an important thing to always keep in mind in a time where it is nothing but us and them and constant divide. Let's not let those things creep into beekeeping more so than they already have. There's so much awesome folks and community out there, and I really appreciate you, Glade, coming on tonight and just sharing, your approach with bees, and we can just kind of learn from that, learn from everybody else. I'm the kind of guy to where it doesn't matter if someone's been keeping it. Truth be told, if someone walked in the shop today and they hadn't kept bees at all, there is something to learn from that person. There's something to learn from the person who has 1,000 colonies and have been doing it for 50 years. It's not necessarily learning about the technique and how to hold the hive tool that's important, but mindset, where folks are at, how they think about things, how they put sequences together, systems thinking, all of those kind of things. No matter what your experience is with bees, it's valuable to learn from each other. So there is so much that we can always learn from each other, and I would encourage folks to always keep an open mind and an open heart to that. So Glade, thanks again for joining us tonight. A quick shout out to Mark Bassinger. He brought out the jumbo hives. He brought out 2 of those boxes, a top and a bottom, that we were talking about a couple weeks back on the mystery frame size. He's got that here at the shop. So Mark, thanks for doing that. That's awesome to have that here. And I also want to give a shout out to Roger Chafee, because Roger stopped out, got some equipment, but also dropped off a box of treasure. Literally, we're going to get into that the rest of this wintertime. Brought a historic box of gleanings and bee cultures and magazines, really cool things. And I'm a big believer is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. There's nothing new under the sun. Those that don't learn the history are doomed to repeat it. If we go back and look at some of these old prints, the things that they were talking about, the boogeyman might be a little different. We may call it a little something different now, but guess what, folks? Beekeepers have been dealing with trying to keep their bees alive for longer than I think that we want to admit. Yeah, there's different things that are plaguing them. We've got different challenges. But when you look into some of these old things from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it's the same pile of worry that beekeepers right now have. And to me, that's pretty cool, because we can actually look back and get into the mindset of the beekeepers there. So Roger Chafee, thanks for dropping those off. Looking forward to digging into those and sharing those with our audience, because those are really cool. All the folks tuning in tonight, man, you guys are awesome. We really appreciate you guys. All these, it's been a couple years now rotating on the Nature's Image Farm channel, the Castle Hives channel, the Bruce's Bees channel. We get to bring so many folks in, like Glade, and all the guests on that. Some have YouTube channels, some don't. That's where it's at. Bees is the conduit to the people, and for me, that is just such an incredible blessing here. As you are winding up the season, I'm going to encourage you guys to finish strong. Just because the leaves are turning and you're thinking about getting the flannels out of the closet, it is not time to get into chili cook-off and put the bees away for wintertime. There is still a fall honey harvest for very many of us to be concentrated on, to double down, to do that work. We got to be thinking about feed, nutrition, mites, all those things. Just because there's light at the end of the tunnel doesn't mean it's time to go fishing. Let's get this work done. Let's finish strong. Let's make the most out of the year. You'll be glad that you did in the spring when you've got happy, healthy bees that are busting at the seams. So keep that in mind. Here at the shop, a lot of just really fun things are constantly developing. But hey, if you're in the neck of the woods and you really want to get ahead of wintertime and you want to get your fall preps in place, we just got a beautiful shipment today of Hive Alive fondant. It's on our website, naturesimagefarm.com. We ship it nationwide, whether it's fondant by Hive Alive, the best pollen patties on the market by Hive Alive, or the liquid itself. If those are supplements that you believe in, that you want to try, that you feel are important for your operation, we would love it if you give us a shot at naturesimagefarm.com. We ship it out every day. What you guys do to support us, we cannot thank you enough. It literally keeps the lights on here and helps us do what we do. Next week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern on the Nature's Image Farm channel. Buckle up. I think we're going to get fired up. We're going to be talking about queens. We're going to be talking about late season requeening. We're going to be talking about downsizing splits. I've got a feeling it's going to get rowdy. So join us next Wednesday, 8 p.m. on the Nature's Image Farm YouTube channel. Thanks again, Glade, Bruce, Brian. Really appreciate you guys. Everyone tuning in. We love you. We thank you. We appreciate you. As always, we want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.